live from the Deer and Deer Hunting headquarters here in Iowa, Wisconsin. Welcome to spring, welcome to shed hunting, welcome to turkey hunting, welcome to Deer Talk Now. Once again, I'm Dan Schmidt along with Brian Lovett. Thanks for joining us today. We got a great show with you in store for you today. We're going to talk a little bit of turkey hunting again because it is spring, and we're going to talk about shed hunting with one of the best shed hunters in the United States. First, Brian, let's talk about turkeys again. Brian is our resident turkey hunting expert. Brian has been with Turkey and Turkey Hunting Magazine for almost 20 years. And Brian is the guy that I always go to for tips on not only hunting hard turkeys in late season, but also in early season, which we kind of really haven't had anything like this before.
Yeah, we're looking at kind of a unique situation this year. Now, you called it spring. We're not so sure after today. You know, snow, cars in the ditch everywhere. But we were talking about, you know, just the stage where the turkeys are at around here, and they're still very much in winter survival mode. You know, they're huge flocks, you know, gobbler groups, family groups, just basically surrounding the best food source they can find right now. And of course, as the weather warms and fields green up and more mast becomes available to them, or agricultural fields become available to them, that's going to change, you know, and they're going to, of course, start breaking up a little bit here as we get in toward the breeding season. But again, that early season, or those early seasons, especially our youth hunt, which is coming up here in less than 3 weeks, could be a little challenging.
It's going to be challenging, and that's the question I want to ask you, because like I said, I always go to Brian when I have these questions, but my daughter's going to be hunting in that youth season. It's coming up here really fast.
Yep.
And one thing that you've always taught me over the years is, you know, you got to try to get as close to those roosted turkeys as possible in the morning to improve your odds. With a crusty snow in the woods, how do you even go about doing that?
It's really tough, you know, because of course you get a calm morning and just not only are you more visible on the floor of the woods, but you're going to make so much noise, you almost really can't take that risk, you know, unless something would change quite a bit here, and we're hoping it does. If you have crunchy snow in the woods, you really have to back off and play it safe. Kind of almost reverse your tactics and try to anticipate where those birds are going to be. Now, whether that's at a food source, you know, an agricultural field, hard mast, whatever, and try to set up some kind of blind or set up there, great, or a travel route to those areas, you know. I mean, if I had to go hunting today, that's what I would be doing. In fact, Brad Rux and I were talking the other day about the upcoming youth hunt, and I think both of us have a plan of trying to find the hottest agricultural field we can, setting up a tent blind, just kind of being there waiting for turkeys to arrive.
So that's a really good, it's a good tactic, because we kind of get lulled into that, that schedule or the routine of, oh, I got to be within 100 yards of that roost, but now it's like, well, you know what, those turkeys are probably going to be 300, 400, 500 yards over that way, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning. Maybe start there and wait for them to come to you. Yeah,
in fact, we did a Learn to Hunt event over at Howard's Grove, Wisconsin last year, and it was the first weekend of April, and there was knee-deep snow in the woods. And we actually, I remember sitting there in the dark trying to find areas on the slope that weren't covered in snow where we could sit down and not make a ton of noise. And there were actually birds roosted across the woodlot from us that gobbled pretty well. And, you know, on an ordinary day in spring, we would have, you know, gotten up and slipped closer to them. There was no way we could do it last year, so we basically sat there, called to them, they flew down the other way, and that was our morning hunt. That was it. You know, there was really nothing we could have done differently.
Nothing you could do, but you give it a shot and, and try to go for that. Brian, let's tell the listeners you're spearheading this for the next 6 weeks at deeranddeerhunting.com, a special turkey hunting section.
Yeah, it's really exciting, you know, because there's quite a bit of crossover. I mean, most of the folks, or quite a few of the folks at deeranddeerhunting.com and who read the magazine are also avid turkey hunters, you know. And really what's on our mind this time of year is shed hunting and turkey hunting, you know. It's kind of before food plot season gets going. So we're trying to add some turkey content every Tuesday, calling cleverly enough Turkey Tuesdays. And it's content that we have from Turkey and Turkey Hunting Magazine, including our annual that we had out earlier this spring. Along with that, we have some really great videos from our friend Shane Simpson at callingallturkeys.com. So it's kind of a neat package that we put together, and we'll be spreading the word on social media, Twitter and Facebook as well. But every Tuesday is going to be fresh content there, solid how-to advice on one aspect or another of turkey hunting, along with the video. So we're very excited about it.
It's awesome stuff. The first post is up there already. Check it out. It's in the deer hunting tips section of our website, but we call it Turkey Tuesdays. Brian's putting some really good stuff and some cool videos too. You want to check that out. Also, you're going to want to check out the specials at shopdeerhunting.com. Again, this week, we got some great stuff in there. I got a blog up there today at the Whitetail Wisdom blog spot about making venison jerky, and we just made some on Sunday. These new West End products are fabulous. I can't believe that we've been messing around with some of this other stuff over the years because these guys at Weston, they know what they're doing. Some great jerky guns, grinders, dehydrators, smokers, anything you want to process your own venison, wild game, turkey, whatever. I'm going to be smoking a turkey in that smoker hopefully this spring. I've got to get one on the ground first, but that should be some good stuff. But check that out at Shop Deer. Again, if you say you saw it on Deer Talk, you get a 10% off discount, which is cool. Just type that in the box as you check out. Today, though, we're going to be talking about shed hunting with a good friend of ours and a former co-worker, Joe Shed. Not spelled the same, Joe Shed. It's S-H-E-A-D. Joe worked here with us at Deer and Deer Hunting for several years. He started as an intern in the late 1990s, I believe it was. Worked as a managing editor for us. And Joe went off on his own. He's living the dream. He's been in Alaska. He's lived all over the place. He's a muskie fishing guide. He's a salmon fishing guide. But he's a huge, he is the shed hunter. When you think about hunting for shed antlers, Joe's the guy. We actually have 2 of Joe's videos at Shop Deer Hunting. This is the first one he did. It's called, cleverly enough, Go Shed Hunting. And his second follow-up to that is called Western Shed Hunting Adventure. And Joe also has a book on basically shed hunting, a guide to finding whitetail deer antlers. We're going to get Joe on the line here. We're going to talk some shed hunting, and he's going to give us some tips that hopefully can help you find more sheds this spring and most of all know where to look for them, especially in these areas where the snow's coming down. So let's get Joe on the line and let's talk some shed hunting.
Hello.
Hi, Joe.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, Dan Schmidt, Brian Lovett, Deer Talk Now. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dan.
Brian and I were talking. We can't treat you just like any other guest because we know you so well. So we're gonna try to keep this as professional yet as conversational as possible.
Okay.
You're probably grinning right now, but we are going to try to keep it professional. So.
Okay, gotcha.
As we mentioned, Joe has been a good friend of ours and a longtime co-worker here at Deer and Deer Hunting. Joe was managing editor for several years, and he spearheaded many projects when he was here. If you've gotten the Deer Hunter's Almanac, that was a lot of Joe's hard work back in the day. Joe has done so many things for Deer and Deer Hunting, but one of the biggest things that Joe's forged ahead and is known for is shed hunting. And if you haven't seen his book, maybe you've seen his articles in the magazine and elsewhere, but Joe has really learned not only on how to find sheds, but where to find them on the landscape, as far as what kinds of properties you go to. And that's what we're going to talk about with Joe a little bit today. So Joe, let's get started. We had a bunch of questions come in over our social media pages and our Google email here at Deer and Deer Hunting. And the first one is an obvious one. And the reader wants to know, where do I start on a property? How do I go to find, how do I eliminate some dead areas right off the bat?
Well, I think the key to deer hunting or shed hunting or anything is really in scouting. If you can get out there in the wintertime and whether you're have scouting cameras out, seeing deer around, or visually observing them, or even just finding tracks in snow or mud, that's the biggest key, is to kind of scout it out and figure out where they're going to be, and that'll really help you cut down your search when it's time to actually get out and look for antlers.
Hey Joe, let's just say I want to shed hunt on a property that has a lot of open area, like cornfield or pine plantations, things like that. I mean, is there a trick or a certain method that you like to use to finding sheds in these open areas?
Well, in the open, you can kind of rely more on optics. You can glass, find a high vantage point and glass around a little bit. That'll help you eliminate or help you save some time. And even maybe even incorporating like an ATV or something like that in a cornfield. It's pretty monotonous walking a cornfield. You're probably going to miss some of the smaller ones, but some of the bigger ones should be able to pop out pretty readily.
That leads to the next question, Joe, that we had come in, and this is one I know that you're very familiar with, but one of the readers said, I hunt public land, therefore I really don't shed hunt because I couldn't find sheds on public land. True or false?
Well, it's true in some respects. It's obviously a lot harder to bag a deer on public land. It's a lot harder to find a shed on public land just because, there aren't as many bucks surviving to drop antlers on there. Um, you know, everybody says, what makes a trophy? Well, sometimes finding a shed on public land sure makes a trophy. I've hunted shed hunted some public properties that, where I just don't feel like I have much of a chance of finding a shed. But then again, some of these big national forests and areas where I live in northern Wisconsin and northern Minnesota, there's sheds out there. It takes a lot more searching. It's a lot harder to do, but it certainly can be done.
What about let's talk about that for a little bit, because I know where you live in northern Wisconsin, you really got hammered with the winter this winter this year. How are things looking for you up there?
Yeah, it's been really tough. I took a little cursory walk last week, and it was still over my knees, and then we got 5 inches of snow since then. So it's basically been non-existent here. So it's going to be a really tough year on this year too. I mean, I'm expecting to find a lot of winter kills this winter, so it's really going to be a bad winter for the deer here.
Hey Joe, I remember a shed hunt I was on in Michigan probably 3-4 springs ago, and we were actually in a dark creek bottom, and yet I was amazed at how many sheds that you would walk over or wouldn't notice, or you'd go back through the area and then notice again, and you wondered how you missed them the first time. And that was on very dark soil again in the timber. When it's like this and there's still a fair bit of snow on the ground, I mean, do you have any tips for just picking out these white antlers on tough cover, or I guess, training your eye to find more sheds?
Yeah, it's one thing to get in an area where there's sheds, but then it's another thing to actually see it. I mean, when you're deer hunting, I mean, you can see a deer running, and that's a lot easier to spot the deer. But with shed hunting, you're kind of looking for little bits and pieces. A lot of times, it might be buried in snow or grass or sticking out of the ground or who knows what. And you might only see a couple of inches of an antler tine poking out, or you might be looking for that curve of a main beam, or sometimes that it kind of almost looks like a golf ball when you see the pedicles pop out. So you got to kind of train your eyes to look for those things rather than just expecting to see a whole antler laying there.
These are tips from Joe Shed, author of the book Shed Hunting, A Guide to Finding Whitetail Deer Antlers. Joe, tell us about, I've seen your book, Brian has your book. The viewer who has not seen your book, what are some of the things they're going to learn if they pick up a copy from Shop Deer Hunting today?
Well, it's kind of the whole gamut from the antler growing process and the shedding process, and then getting into tips of, how to find a property to look, because like we said, with public land, there can certainly be sheds out there, but sometimes you're better off trying to find areas where maybe there is no deer hunting, where these deer are protected so that more bucks can survive. So I give tips on how to find those areas, and then actually how to do it, how to go out there, how to eliminate ground. If you've got a 40-acre parcel of property, this is the areas that I would look for. This is the areas that your time might be better spent somewhere else. And other tips, a little bit on training shed dogs, a little bit about going to Canada if you want to try to bring sheds back from Canada, how to match up a set, just kind of the whole gamut of what it takes to find antlers.
No, actually, Joe, the shed dog aspect is very appealing to me. I'm of course, duck hunter and a dog guy. In your experience, what's the process, or I shouldn't say that because it's probably very involved. Can you maybe kind of just outline the process that folks can go through to train their hunting dog to find sheds?
Oh, well, that's something that I really haven't dealt with personally. I know guys that have done it, and they say it's really not that much different than training a dog to find birds. It's, they're looking for a dog with good hunting instincts, good retrieving skills, and a willingness to please the master. And from what I've talked to guys like Jeremy Moore at Shed Dog, dogs can be multi-sport athletes, really. They can be bird dogs in the fall and shed dogs in the spring. He said as long as you've got that hunting instinct, I mean, they can be really versatile.
One of the cool things about not only taking a dog out, but, and I know this is one of the reasons why you got started, Joe, is yeah, it's neat to get out there in spring because there's not a lot. You're still kind of waiting for the good spring fishing to start. But when you're shed hunting, I know that you've made an art out of finding those travel routes that we always talk about between bedding and feeding areas. How does that relate when you're hunting for sheds? What kind of correlation do you see between where you're finding these sheds and the good hunting spots in fall when you're bow hunting?
Well, it depends on the area you're at. Some areas that I'm looking at are yarding areas, so those deer aren't necessarily going to be there in the fall when you're hunting them, but in other areas it'll be similar. And a lot of times what you're going to find is deer are going to bed to take advantage of outwitting predators. They're going to bed in a high spot. They're going to bed where they've got prevailing winds at their back so they can smell predators from behind them and be watching downwind. And it correlates to deer hunting as well. I mean, that's how deer are going to bed. That's how they're going to travel. Always taking advantage of predators and trying to be aware of their surroundings. So I guess that's kind of a big part of it.
It's some really good points you bring up there too, especially for folks that are hunting on small properties. If you're in, you don't have to be in the upper Midwest. You could be in the Southeast or even in a little bit of the Southwest. You're hunting a small property. One thing that I found interesting, and I got this from Joe, is those bedding areas. As far as, you talk about how they bed on high points. How many times have you been shed hunting and found a bedding area in, let's say now, in March, and there's still snow on the ground, or maybe the snow has just left and there's a little bit of residual snow there, you can see where those deer are bedding. You could say, you know what, I've always busted deer when I've been trying to get on this property and they've always been over there. Now you know where that spot is. So you might go out there and you might be shed hunting and you might not find anything, but you just learned stuff that it would take you years to learn had you not been doing this. I think that's some really good points. Joe, let's talk also, I know you got these two videos, they're both good, but the first one I think is where you get into a lot of these tactics. Go shed hunting. Let's talk about that DVD, how that came to be, and a little bit of the content that our viewers are going to expect when they pop this in their DVD player.
Okay. Well, I mean, the book came out first, and I thought the DVD was kind of a natural follow-up, where I could take these concepts I was talking about in the book, and rather than just talking about them, actually show you what I'm doing. I'm going out in the woods, and I'm saying, hey, this is, every time I find a shed, I don't just say, well, here's a shed. I kind of try to explain why I found that shed. Okay, I thought this deer was bedding here, or I thought he was, traveling from point A to point B. So we're trying to make it instructional, and entertaining at the same time.
Now, actually, the second video is very interesting to me also, Joe, the Western Shed Venture. I guess we're used to hunting, big timber and smaller woodlots, smaller areas here in the northern Midwest. What are the differences for shed hunting as you described in Canada, in the western United States? Is it the same concept, just over a much larger landscape, the same principles apply, or is it a whole different ball game?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting, as long as you start with your basics, those principles carry over whether you're shed hunting in the Midwest or out, in the Rockies, or even in urban areas, right in downtown Washington D.C. There's some basic principles that deer follow. How they bed, how they travel. In the Western video, we found that there's not a lot of cover out there. It's a lot of wide open spaces. So we find the small areas of cover, like you'd have lots of trees growing, lots of cottonwoods growing along these river bottoms, and for miles that would really be the only cover. So it starts with bedding. You look for the cover, and then where are these deer bedding, and then where they're going to go to feed, and kind of just link it up. So it's really kind of universal. It's just on a different landscape.
How has that spoiled you, Joel, being out there? And I know that you've found elk sheds, you've found moose sheds. How has that spoiled you now to coming back home and looking for whitetail sheds?
Well, it's really fun when you can go out west and you can get in these areas where these deer are concentrated, where there seems to be less hunting pressure, and you can go out and find maybe 15 or 20 sheds a day. It's a lot of fun. But honestly, I go on these trips. I've been out west. I've been up into Canada and stuff. But to be honest with you, it means more to me to find a couple of small antlers on my home turf where I know these deer and I kind of can relate to them than it does to find a big antler out west, someplace where I have no relationship with that deer.
What are some of the regulations for other states out west and Canada? Is there a limit on how many sheds you can bring home and how many you can pick up, or how does that work?
Well, I don't think there's any limits as far as how many you can pick up. I know some states do have seasons now because they don't want to protect the animals. They don't want people bothering them when they're on their wintering grounds. I'm not sure on the regulations. I think Wyoming may have something like that, and maybe some areas of Montana as well. I'm not sure on that. And then as far as Canada, it's kind of a sticky situation. It's not really well enforced. The U.S. government is concerned about importing antlers back into the states. Just concerned with the diseases that the deer might have picked up from cattle or something up there. And there's a import-export permit that you can get that that should help you bring antlers back. Otherwise, most border crossing agencies allow you to bring 4 back if you don't have the permit, but it's not really well enforced. It's subject to interpretation. Some border crossing spots will allow you to take 4 antlers, some will take like 4 sets, so it's not really well enforced.
Hey Joe, as we talked before, the interest in shed hunting now is greater than it's ever been, I think. Much more so than when you worked here, 10, 12 years ago. What's that like in the woods nowadays? I mean, are you actually encountering situations where you're feeling as if you have to compete to find sheds, or it's tougher to find sheds in certain areas? Or do you think there's still plenty to go around and it's more of a, isolated in certain spots?
Oh, there's a lot of days I wish I had never written that book. There's definitely a lot of competition. Basically for my shed hunting, I started out early in the season. I started out in town shed hunting these urban deer because they're visible and because there's so much competition for them that you kind of have to be out there, every day walking the same trails over and over because there are that many other shed hunters. It really has gotten popular. So it's definitely a growing sport. It seems to get bigger every year, and it's frustrating from a shed hunting standpoint, but it sure is getting a lot of other people interested in deer and deer hunting, and I think it's probably good for the hunting sport overall.
I agree. I mean, it is frustrating, especially when you've been out there and you find boot tracks and you're like, oh, do I even bother going? But
right.
Joe, you can take full credit for getting everybody at least a little bit more antler insane out there because of the work you've done on this. Joe, I want to thank you today for joining us. Also, I want to remind everybody that you have to check these videos out and the book. This is the first video. It's called Go Shed Hunting with Joe Shed. The second one is here. It's Western Shed Hunting Adventure, and the book, of course, is Shed Hunting, A Guide to Finding Whitetail Deer Antlers. You can find all of that at shopdeerhunting.com. We have all 3 products individually, or you can buy the whole kit and caboodle set collection of all 3 products. Or better yet, you can go to Joe's website and learn more about shed hunting, see some of his photos, see some of his videos, and that is, conveniently enough, goshedhunting.com right there on your internet browser. Joe, thanks again for joining us. We hope to see you real soon, and we hope you have some good luck out there this spring.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Joe.
I always like talking to Joe, Brian, because Joe is one of those guys who basically said, you know what, I don't want to just talk about this, I want to live it, and he's doing it.
Absolutely. I always loved Joe because he had such enthusiasm for all things outdoors, whether it was fishing, deer hunting, of course, bird hunting, and he's taken that and translated it into shed hunting as well now. And it's, I really think he's correct that in writing that book and doing these videos, he's really increased interest in shed hunting.
He really has, because you not only see more people out there shed hunting, but you're seeing this influx of products. You're seeing, people trying to train their dogs. We have the products there at Shop Deer Hunting as well. As there's actual fake shed antlers that you can train your dog to. There's scents. There's all sorts of things like that. So if you want to get some more of that information, be sure to check out our website, deeranddeerhunting.com, shopdeerhunting.com for the actual products, deeranddeerhunting.com for the articles. That's it for this week. For Brian Lovett, I'm Dan Schmidt. I want to thank you for joining us for Deer Talk Now. Join us again next week right here at deeranddeerhunting.com.